तो इसका उन्वान है, अगर कभी मेरी याद आए। अगर कभी मेरी याद आए, गुरेज करती हवा की लहरों पे हाथ रखना। मैं खुशबुओं में तुम्हें मिलूंगा, मुझे गुलाबों की पत्तियों में तलाश करना। मैं ओस कतरों के आईनों में तुम्हें मिलूंगा। अगर खुशबुओं में, गुलाब की पत्तियों में, ओस कतरों में तुम मुझे ढूंढ ना पाओ, तो अपने दिल की गहराइयों में ढूंढना। शायद तुम्हारे दिल की धड़कनों में तुम्हें मिलूंगा, अगर कभी मेरी याद आए।
Hello, welcome, and Kushamadit. This is Expulsion at 50, an oral history project using podcasts. My name is Dola Vasani. In October 2021, I had the pleasure of speaking with Yunus Shah, a radio presenter, successful businessman, and lover of Urdu poetry. This is a story of going back to the future. I hope you enjoy listening to our conversation.
If you imagine what's happening in Afghanistan, right? And people are running out and trying to get away and all that, because of the war. The same thing was happening around that time in 1900s. But then my father had to leave here because my grandmother decided that it wasn't safe for him to be there. My parents came from, well, at that time it was North India, which is now Northwest Frontier. My father actually initially left his part of the world in 1919, when he was barely about 19 odd years old. And then he made his way and he ended up in Hong Kong and Singapore and Malaysia. And then from there, he found his way to Africa. So in 1924, he arrived in Africa and then obviously set base there. He went back to India at that time, married my mother, and in 1934, they came back to Africa because of all that was happening. And he eventually ended up going through all those countries, ended up in Africa. So what I'm saying is the situation on the ground hasn't changed much in that part of the world, has it? Imagine 1900, my father making that trek, and it's 2021 now. The similar things happen.
In 1934, they went back to Uganda. Did they go straight to Uganda, or were they in Kenya or in Tanzania?
The problem was that at that time in Kenya also, there's a lot of problems. I don't know whether you're aware, but there was an apartheid system operating in Kenya. And my father, coming from the place he was, didn't take kindly to that, but eventually decided to move into Uganda because Uganda was a protectorate. The laws and rules of the colonialization weren't that strict over there. They moved into Uganda and went into Western Uganda, a place known as Barara in Kabale,
And what did he do what was his profession?
He became a transporter. He had a lorry. He was transporting goods. But at the same time, because of his professions with the guns, he obviously coming from that part of the world, was good with guns. He also managed to get a license. He was being used to cull the wild animals at that time that were roaming freely in that part of the world. So, so he was hired as one of the game wardens as well to look after and cull the animals. At the same time, he was transporting, and I think there is a mines, or used to be a mine, Kilembe mines, and which was in near Barara, Kilembe, and he used to transport the ore and the brass that used to come out of that mine.
So let's hear about your childhood in Kampala.
When you think about those years, carefree years, you know, the sunny days with cool morning breezes, beautiful fauna, flowers, and, you know, we have these seeping, beautiful, bright yellows and deeps and reds and pinks and all those colors. I mean, these are all stick in my mind. And of course, all the foods that we used to have as little kids, we used to steal from our sort of cook, you know. It was his, you know, they used to have different food from us. It was sweet potatoes, groundnuts, you know, pineapples, papaya, and all that sort of a thing. But also, I think one of the big thing was there was a lot of laughter and happiness all around, and celebrated all the religious festivals, including Diwali, Eid, Christmas, and Baisakhi.
Where did you go to school then?
The primary school, there was a school that had opened up in Kampala, Shimoni Primary School. It was a pilot school, you know, and mostly over there, the syllabus were all English, and we were not allowed to speak any other language at that time. After that, I went into the secondary school, Old Kampala Secondary School, and that's where I had my senior education. It was an amazing experience. It was so, how can I put it? I came from a Shimoni school, which was a very sort of a, as I said, because it was a pilot scheme school, it was very, very strict, disciplined school, and a small school in that way. And coming from that thing, you straight away come into a senior school, and obviously now it's a totally different world, isn't it? You are on your own, you are in with the big boys, and I felt sort of as if I was free, you know, I had been released from something. I enjoyed that a lot. And this is where, really speaking, I also then started finding my feet. And my father was very good at Urdu, you know, and he used to read a lot of Mirza Ghalib, you know, these are poets of known poets at that time, and Allama Iqbal and all that. And so that's where it started from. But because I was good at Urdu, I could speak the language, and Hindustani, as you may say, I was picked to do some radio programs and shows. And from there, obviously, I started working for radio and television as a presenter and broadcaster. Basically, I was a science student, you know, I was very good at science. I was in what you call as, I was streamlined into science classes. And when an Urdu subject was proposed and I took it, it didn't please my science teachers. That it's a dead language, it's not going to do me any good. But I mean, there you are, you know, it opened quite a few doors for me.
So then you also talk about the performing arts, like theater.
Yeah.
So also, was that at school?
It started with school. It started from there. But eventually then when I went into the radio and television part of it, it developed even more. And obviously did quite a few stage plays in our normal national theater. I finished my school in 1965. But now there was a problem. Politically, the agitation had already started against the Asians. And mostly now, because we were British citizens, don't forget, I was holding a British passport. It was becoming very, very difficult to go into further education. And because of all that, I mean, I was lucky enough. My family wasn't rich enough for me to go abroad. But I was lucky enough to get an opportunity to work with radio and television. And so that was my first stop after my senior school.
So you went straight from school to employment?
That's right, yeah. How can I put it? That was an amazing, amazing experience. As you can imagine, I was hardly in my 20s. And here I was, right in the middle of it. You know, I was obviously on a national television and radio. And my programs were being broadcast all over the country and the neighboring countries as well. So it's quite a responsibility. But I also had a good fortune of meeting most of the celebrities and film stars and, people who came in. And I also interviewed the Nawab of Pataudi when he was captain of Indian cricket side touring Uganda. He was the captain. He was also a Nawab of Pataudi. I mean, obviously a landed title gentry. A very, very powerful man, obviously, being a prince, and amazing. His wife is Sharmila Tagore. Oh. He married her. His son is Saif Ali Khan, who's an actor as well, and so these were the sort of people. Yes, there were actors as well, Shashi Kapoor, Sunil Dutt, Sadhna, there was all a film, music directors, C. Ramchandra, Qawwali singers.
So you had your own radio show, did you?
Yeah, it used to be 12:30 to 1, which was sort of your requests.
Oh, Farmaish.
Farmaish, yes, Aapki Farmaish we used to call it. And there used to be a 15-minute slot for news in the evenings at 5 o'clock. That was every day. On Sunday, 6 and 7 p.m. used to be my television show every Sunday.
And what did you do on TV then?
Presented again all these programs, musicians, Asian musicians, singers, dancers, and celebrities, whoever came, interviewed them. So it was a mixed bag of everything.
It's like an arts program.
Yes, but entertaining, because public at large needed some form of entertainment. So we'd have all the youngsters who were coming up, musicians. They had a sort of a stage to show their talents.
And what was the name of the show?
It used to be known as Hindustani program.
Yeah, I believe, from my other interviews and also from my parents' experiences, because I was a bit too young, but there was a very vibrant art scene at the time.
Yes.
Homegrown, like, doing theater within the community, but also having all these people coming from the subcontinent. Huh?
Yes, of course. Absolutely. I mean, this is where our television shows were quite a hit, because that's where that was a showcase for these talents. So there were, groups. I mean, these people became very successful later on. There's Deepak Khazanchi and his family. He's a very, very successful music producer today in UK.
So you became quite a well-known person then, no?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay, so then 1972 comes, and you were in the media. You must have picked up that stuff was not going as well as, was turning.
Yes, absolutely. Politically, Asians in Uganda were like hot potato. We were being targeted all the time by all the upcoming African politicians and were being branded as the usurpers of local African livelihoods, and that we had amassed wealth at their expense. I mean, these are all political talk and how politicians go about it. Unfortunately, at the same time, the British government had declared that all Commonwealth citizens, non-white, holding British passports, did not have the right to enter UK. Therefore, they had put in these very strict visa requirements. And, so this was creating even a bigger problem. And at the same time, there was, due to Africanization, all non-Ugandans were being put on notice in Uganda. This gave the anti-Asian brigade extra ammunition. And finally, when Idi Amin was installed to power, he jumped on the idea and put all Asians on notice to leave the country on a 90-day ultimatum. Imagine, we were not only being evicted from our homes, but being thrown out of the country and made stateless and actually nowhere to go. So you can imagine, I mean, the panic that was over there. It was total chaos. And after being rebuffed by the British Embassy, both me and my brother, his name was Farouk as well, decided to up the stakes, and we rounded up the crowd outside the embassy and started galvanizing. The idea was just to force the British government to do something about our state. But obviously things were getting heated up. And of course, there was a lot of coverage given. And then there's BBC program Panorama, they came over. And my brother Farouk, who at that time was quite central to what was happening around there, made a very dramatic and emotional appeal in the name of British justice and human rights. He just waved the British passport at the interviewer and said that he had been made stateless at a stroke, which was so true for all of us, you know. So you can imagine, I mean, that was a very, very difficult time. Then finally we did manage to get out. It was like a thunderbolt from the skies. You at least ever expect anything like that. I mean, for somebody like me who's born there, that's my country. Everything that I know about myself, my life, what's happening around me is Uganda. That's my country, my place. All of a sudden, when something like this happens, you're being thrown out. The country that you're holding, you have a valid passport for, is also rebuffing you. My mother was pretty well shaken up. She just couldn't, she didn't know what to do, what to say. And just imagine for her to be uprooted, not knowing where to go at that later stage in life. Also, maybe to end up in a place totally alien to her.
How old was your mother, Yunus?
How old was my mother at that time?
Yeah, in 1972. Do you remember?
She was about 55.
Because in the beginning, people are thinking, is this a hoax or is this really happening for real?
Yes.
And then the panic sort of sets in. People are trying to get their papers in order.
Yeah.
And then, as you say, you get rebuffed at the British High Commission, even though you have the passport. So on what grounds are they saying no?
Well, they're saying I have a D passport. Now, this D is a big word. At that time, the words being bandied about was that these were just documents handed out at that time to British citizens who were non-white and who were in Commonwealth countries, for them to travel safely around Commonwealth countries, but not necessarily come to Britain. Now, obviously, this was all, how can I put it? I mean, you can appreciate it was just a hoax, wasn't it? It was a color thing. I mean, I had white friends who were born in Uganda, yet they could go freely back to UK.
Yeah, and I think that's an interesting thing, that people had the British passport, but then they found out, well, actually, some people were more equal than others or had more rights than others.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the injustice of it. Obviously, when we did come to this country, that was another big shock. October, I think, that yes, we did get our visas to travel.
What was it like to kind of pack up your life then?
Well, that was it. I mean, you couldn't take anything with you except what clothing you had. Any jewelry and things like that was a difficult situation because whatever you could manage, but quite a bit was also snatched away by the security guards at Entebbe. When you loaded up, whatever else they could put their hands on, they were taken off you. There was nothing you could do about it.
And how did your colleagues react to you once this announcement was made?
When you are part of Ministry of Information and Tourism, well, it was a strange thing again, Obviously, they were very shocked. And my African colleagues were terribly, obviously, very, very shocked, very supportive, But then, obviously, you always have all sorts, don't you? We also had some people who obviously were rejoicing in the fact. I mean, obviously, these were people who were having a tough time were born over there. And so you can imagine, all sorts of things were happening at that time.
And your mom? How was it for your mom?
Very tough. Very, very tough. So you can imagine coming from North India at that time. And she grew up there. She knew the local languages. She could speak local languages. She could talk to, and she was comfortable. She had friends and everything as such. But if now is being uplifted there and going into an alien country, she couldn't speak English. And that was one of the big problems. And that families, supportive, extended families situation, really speaking, you should have to start from scratch again. And I think at that age, it's always difficult, isn't it?
So there was your mom, who was, 50 odd years old, and then yourself in your 20s, and then your younger siblings, and your older brother was already in the UK, living in Birmingham. And what do you remember about the actual, flight? Had you flown before? Had you traveled much before?
Yes, I had. Yes, I had. So, but obviously I haven't traveled to Britain before. So that was quite a thing. You can appreciate it. To us, that time, Britain was heavenly, wasn't it? I mean, that was the sort of thing that you always thought of. London, and the streets were paved with gold, and Buckingham Palace and Wembley Stadium, and, all that sort of things, Trafalgar Square. And you have these great big things. I tell you what, when I reached Heathrow, it was dull, it was dark, it was wet. Actually, the country was in a mess. The labor unions had called a countrywide strike, and it was actually a 3-day working week. The streets were full of rubbish and rats, food shortages, and rationing was in progress. Unemployment was sky high. Racism was at a peak. And with all two-let accommodation displaying signs of no Asians, no coloreds, and no dogs.
I'm sure as a child you probably played things like Monopoly, so you were very familiar with some of those streets, like Oxford Street and Pall Mall and
Yeah.
And there you come, and it's October, and it's autumn, and it's dull, and it's dark, and it's wet.
Yeah.
Okay, so how was it to then arrive in the Midlands and starting all over again?
Midlands was an industrial place at that time. So my brother was an engineer, and eventually we did that, and then obviously went through a whole process of settling down and starting and sort of restarting, and eventually got into some kind of a business. And from that point onwards, started building on it. And eventually, I then owned a fish restaurant, and then electrical, TV, and hi-fi shops, and eventually moved into furniture manufacturing and assembly. And that I had to move to South Wales. And so I did that for then 25 odd years. At that point, I was employing at least about 400 people, Welsh people. So
your whole childhood and in your early career was in the media.
Yeah.
And then you come to the UK and then you get into all kinds of other things, retail business, manufacturing, hospitality.
I remember, I didn't have all that education behind me. Now, I was coming in here. Nobody was going to give me a job which was pay me handsomely for that. And I had a family to cater for. So really speaking, most of us Ugandan Asians realized we had to go into some kind of a business, work for ourselves to be able to make something. The easiest thing to start was, I may say, it may sound odd to others, was a fish restaurant. And the reason was you could get your material, fish and potatoes, on a daily basis, and you would have to pay by the weekend or end of the week. So I could get that in, make it all up, sell it, make the money out of it, and then pay back and have some for myself. That was an easier way, wasn't it? Otherwise, where would I get the money to start?
Did you have a fish and chip shop?
Yeah, absolutely.
A chippy with
That should be
out of the
absolutely.
newspaper.
Yes, absolutely.
Wow, that's
Absolutely.
quite something, huh, Eunice, that you start completely from nothing. And
Yeah.
then you find yourself in manufacturing in furniture.
In furniture, in South Wales, Cardiff, yeah. These are the journeys that most of us made because we started with nothing and we had to scratch things together. We had to do certain things, but on our own, because, I mean, there was no other way to raise money. At that time, nobody would give you money, in that respect. And coming as a refugee or an immigrant into a country, as it is a difficult thing, it's a big load to carry. But there we were, we all did. And when you look back at the Ugandan nation's contribution to Britain, I tell you what, we should be very, very proud.
And may I ask what happened to your mum?
My mum, well, she being a real frontier woman from the mountains of Northwest Frontier, always had this fighting spirit in her. And she evolved again. When she came here, she evolved again, learned to speak English. Can you believe it at that later age? I remember I used to take her to these evening classes and sit with her at times just to make sure. And that's how it started, It's quite a
After 25 odd years in the business of assembling furniture, Eunice decided to close the factory in South Wales. And after visiting Uganda in the early 1990s, he decided to explore starting something there.
And because then I decided to go back to Uganda because I still had our family, part of my wife's family had gone back there. They had businesses there, they had farms. And when I went in there, on their farm, I put in an idea of starting a furniture manufacturing thing set up, which was quite unique in that if anybody wanted, I mean, with all the things happening in Uganda, new houses being built, new boutique hotels coming in, and, apartments. So if any of the furniture that they required for it, I'm talking about good quality furniture, they would either have to go to Dubai or to South Africa and ultimately go to China or that part of the world. So for you to have a total product installed, if you were building something, then the wait time was really up to 6 months. Because if you went and picked certain things that you wanted, then you would have to wait for them to build it for you and then to transport it to you as well. So it was a long period as such. And what I was saying was, if we have a base and we carry some of the stock here, different kinds, we don't have to really go into one big thing. Like we start with making local bedrooms and kitchens, windows, doors. So that was how we started. So we worked on that project, and it took us nearly about 3 years. Eventually, it took off.
And how was that? Because that's like 20 years later, you go back.
Yeah. Well, actually, really speaking, it was like it was absolutely as I had left it.
When you went back in 1996, you felt at the time it stood still, huh?
Yeah, that's right. Absolutely, as it was, things were obviously certain things were coming back. People were now started to get themselves organized. The world was opening up to them. Museveni obviously had promised, and he was trying to put together plans to get the country started. That's why he was inviting all the Asians who had left and who had properties and who had interest to come back. So things had started happening, but everything was the same. And, but it was nice to be back, though. It was nice to be back.
And was it a difficult decision for you to sort of take that quite a big risk, to say, okay, let's close up in Wales,
Yeah.
after 20 odd years, and start something fresh in back in Uganda?
Yeah, I know. Look, I've been asked this question many times, and Dollar, to be honest, what had happened was when I came to UK, and as we've discussed, the different modes of businesses that I went through, it sort of gave me an inner confidence that, if I tried and I worked at certain things and I worked hard at it, I was achieving it. And these new ideas were paying off. So when I was in Uganda and I was talking to everybody was coming to me because they were aware of my business links and what I had been doing for such a long time. And they were asking for my advice. And when I started looking around and seeing what was happening, it fell into place. I realized, my God, I mean, it's like going back to, going back to future or something, right? There's so much experience from a first world country, and you come back and you're coming back 30 years behind, and you all of a sudden say, my God, how it gold dust here. This could work here, this could work here, this could work here. So it didn't only stop there. I then rushed into India and I got some workers to come over, and I also started a UPS, these what do you call protection units for electricity, when you plug in your TVs, because the electricity levels in Africa, they could not be controlled. They used to damage the appliances. So, you had to have these protectors that you plugged in your equipment before you plugged into the thing. So I set up a small factory of that as well, started building those there, which were very, very successful. Yeah.
It's almost like you see it as virgin territory again, like
Yeah, absolutely.
like
Absolutely.
your father did, all those years ago.
Absolutely. Yes. Absolutely. But I had as I said, that was a great advantage, when you move from a first world country and going back and, everything there is still as it was, then the opportunities and what the people are going to ask for, what it's heading towards. That was a big start. Yeah. Yeah.
As you know, this podcast is being created to really capture the really, really personal and very diverse stories of people
Yeah.
over the last 50 years in to honor
Yeah.
the anniversary next year.
Right.
And I wonder for you, Yunus, what when you think back and you reflect on your life, how do you think that it has shaped you?
Well, at this stage in my life, I'm 75 years old. I have accomplished mostly everything that I wanted to. I have, obviously, my family, my children have all grown up. My children are very well settled. And, so I've done all the bits and pieces that I was required to do. And I have started doing things that I personally hadn't been able to, I had cut myself off from the last 30, 40 odd years. So I am enjoying my life at this moment. I am having a great time. I have gone back into my literature and arts and my shairi, and I've, write poetry and meet friends. And so, it's an amazing thing. I'm enjoying my life.
Wonderful, wonderful. So you've done a full circle, haven't you?
And thank God I'm still in good enough health to enjoy myself. But as I said, I'm so thankful that I'm here. I'm talking to you, Donna. I mean, that's an amazing thing. Honestly, I had a long conversation with my other friends yesterday. I met people like Jamila Siddiqui, who are an amazing, amazing when you think about what they have achieved, and, you feel so proud to be able to have met these people.
Yeah, and so should you feel proud of all your accomplishments.
The present day, where you find that refugees and immigrants are a big problem, aren't they? When you look around you, it's happening all over the place. It's people coming, traveling, God knows from where and what they go through. And it reminds me of what I went through. And I'll tell you, Dollar, it also hurt me when I was listening to my extended family and my children who have grown up, who are very successful, who are having a blissful life here. And then they were not so accommodating when they heard of these immigrants, refugees coming, and they had their reservations about them. And I said, my God, I just thought, where would you guys be if we hadn't made it here and we were still struggling over there and would have been in the same sort of a thing? So I think there's a lesson to be learned that, A, we need to be more tolerant of what's happening around us, because you never know where one will end up. I mean, we never knew what would happen to us. It's, like I said, thunderbolt out of the blue.
Thank you for listening, and do subscribe to this channel to receive the podcasts at your convenience. Look forward to sharing more inspiring stories with you. Khuda Hafiz.